We'll actually pick up HIV-1 and HIV-2. We can make a very, very small jab.
Oh! It's amazing. You can do this test in 50 minutes. You'll be able to tell me whether I'm HIV positive.
Yeah, that's it.
That is extraordinary.
20 years ago, the outcome of that result could literally have meant life or death to me. To be HIV positive then meant an automatic progression to AIDS and the complete destruction of the body's immune system. I visited so many friends dying of AIDS in hospitals in the late 80s and early 90s. And then drugs were discovered. With treatment, HIV slipped off the radar, and what I want to know is whether that's been wise. In the first part of my journey, I found there are 3 times as many people with HIV in Britain today as 10 years ago. And the rise is not confined to gay men. It's growing fastest amongst heterosexuals and black Africans. I found that risky, promiscuous sex is behind the surge in infection. In this program, I want to know if the advances in treatment have made us complacent about catching HIV. We accept becoming infected and just take the medication.
Younger kids are thinking, I can take a pill and I can manage this disease, and I just shake my head like, if you only knew.
I want to know what it's really like to live with HIV.
If I want to go into town, I can't go into town because I've taken my tablets and I'm thrown up. Or I've taken my tablets and I can't get off the toilet for more than 2 minutes.
I want to know why, despite the drugs, people with HIV still die.
It saddens me to think that maybe, one day soon I might not be around to be there for them.
I want to find out if we're making a terrible mistake in thinking it's now safe to forget about HIV.
The young man I told last week, absolutely devastated, trembling with fear and agitation, absolutely feels his life is terrified, ruined, destroyed.
Approximately 6:09 Pacific time, you have to get back on 6:15 Pacific time for a 5-minute earlier.
If any city is associated with how AIDS took hold in the popular imagination, it has to be San Francisco. The gay community here was the first to be decimated.
It was a death sentence. It caused absolute terror, like the Black Death before it.
What San Francisco had that's usually blamed for why HIV spread so rapidly in the early 1980s were the bathhouses. They became symbols of the promiscuous lifestyle of gay men. Places like Eros, where at that time quick sex and multiple partners were the norm. That wasn't my scene at all. But when I meet 3 regulars, I decide to tell them about my one and only visit to a bathhouse.
I have to admit, I've only been to a bathhouse once. It was in the early 90s. I was with an English friend. We were traveling around America. And he said, oh, God, you've got to experience a bathhouse. The moment I got in, I found out my ears were pounding and I was not knowing where to look. It was full of people in muscle vests who raked ones up and down. And I didn't exactly run screaming, but I just left my friend to it and trailed my way back home for a cup of tea in the hotel. I just found myself completely scared.
Being scared was a very useful emotion at that time. It helped keep you safe, unlike those remembered in this mural in the heart of the gay area of San Francisco. And yet, 20 years on, San Francisco is where there's been a breakthrough of another kind. It's here that a drugs company has brought out the HIV pill you need only take once a day, a scientific advance unimaginable 20 years ago.
Good to see you. Every 10 years, whether we like it or not.
It has been too long.
At the height of the AIDS epidemic, Armistead Maupin became famous for novels and then a television series called Tales of the City, about gay life and death there. Armistead's an old friend, and I know he's just finished a new tale, having put the series away for what he thought would be forever 20 years ago, because then there was no future for the novel's gay characters.
Michael Tolliver, the central gay character, was... people used to say to me, I'm glad you stopped writing the series back in 1988 because Michael would be dead by now. The assumption was at the time that you would die if you had AIDS. This is a passage from Michael Tolliver Lives where He's talking about the fact that he has a new partner and he hopes that they'll have 30 years together. I'm still in the valley of the shadow, as Mama would put it, but at least it's a bigger valley these days, and the scenery has improved considerably. My current recipe for continued existence, a fine-tuned mélange of Viramune and Combivir. In my best moments, I'm filled with a curious peace.
I don't suppose you ever believed you could write that, or that Michael would think that in 1990.
In a way, it's an amazing kind of resurrection that I get to do because, because of the way the course of history has changed, the course of science has changed.
There is now a deadly virus which anyone can catch from sex with an infected person.
This was the government's public health message for us in Britain only 20 years ago. It's from a completely different world.
So protect yourself. It's safer if you use a condom.
Designed to terrify Britain at a time when there was no treatment available, those ads forever cast AIDS as a unique infection watched over by powerless doctors. Mark Nelson, now one of Britain's most senior HIV consultants, was one of them.
I can remember a man who had such bad Kaposi's sarcoma of his leg, which was infected, that you couldn't actually go in the room. The smell was just appalling. This guy had 2 or 3 months to live, and his only option was to have his leg amputated, because then there wasn't the smell. People would at least come and visit him. You saw some horrific sights. And, it was almost like a conveyor belt of death.
No wonder those infected snatched at any hope of improvement.
I remember a young lady who went and she had, somewhere in America, they put rattlesnake venom under her tongue and put electrical shocks through it. And she came back and said, look, this works. And she was dead 3 months later.
But by the mid-1980s, scientists made a major discovery. AIDS wasn't the beginning and the end of the infection. The start is HIV, the human immune deficiency virus. Untreated, HIV eventually leads to AIDS by gradually undermining the body's immune system until it can't resist infections. The aim, then, was to find a medicine that would stop that progression of HIV to AIDS. 20 years ago, HIV patients thought that had happened with the drug AZT.
When AZT first came out, I think we had AZT for 10 to 15 people, and it was like the summer sale, Harrod sale, people outside saying, you must give it to me, because, no, don't give it to him.
My life's more important.
Yeah, and we soon learned that it didn't really do much good by itself.
AZT wasn't the miracle drug patients prayed for. It was expensive, toxic, with powerful and awful side effects, and it didn't work. People still kept dying. And then came the World AIDS Conference in Vancouver in 1996.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that when history looks back at Vancouver, it will note that we opened a new chapter in the history of the HIV/AIDS pandemic.
People have been used to going to these conferences and talking about, the best way to die. And then suddenly there was a conference where suddenly we had drugs that worked. We had drugs at our fingertips which were going to save lives, and they've undoubtedly revolutionised the outlook for people living with HIV.
Mark started giving his patients a combination of drugs designed to boost the immune system and control HIV's ability to attack it. 10 years on, this triple therapy, as it's called, is still the basis of treating HIV. Its impact has been enormous.
Today, what we talk about is, this is a chronic disease. They need to plan to live a normal lifespan. You can't just sit back anymore and say, well, I'll be dead in 3 or 4 years. You're going to live 30 or 40 years. We hope.
In a beautiful but remote part of North Wales, I found a man who's experienced the impact the arrival of drug treatment had.
And Ireland? Do you go across to Ireland?
No, I've never been to Ireland.
Tristan and his partner Roy were diagnosed in the mid-90s, just before the combination drugs came on stream. Roy was taken to hospital with pneumonia. What happened to him terrified Tristan.
Shortly after they'd identified it, his lungs collapsed. And after 6 weeks or so in intensive care, we turned off the machines.
And he slipped away?
Yeah. He was never able to breathe again. Because of the nature of the way Roy had died so quickly, and so suddenly and so violently that I thought, you know, it's inevitable. I'm bound to have the same strain. By the time my immune system had declined so that it needed intervention, the drugs were available, and so we started various sort of combinations. Finally, we hit a combination which not only keeps me healthy and is allowing my immune system to climb, but is incredibly benign as a regime, so that I get no side effects whatsoever. I don't think of myself as having HIV anymore. I have functionally forgotten that I've got it. It's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I sat here the other night and cried buckets over comic aid, particularly the bits from Africa. People knowing they're going to die, being torn from their children, and their children knowing. And I thought about what my mother must have gone through. Sorry.
No, I understand.
And it brought that back so powerfully. And I thought, God, you're so fucking lucky. Yeah. You know, that's gone. And it's no longer a terror for my mother, or for my friends, or, you know, even for me. I mean, that's gone.
Be down below 100 this time.
In 10 years, Tristan has gone from what would have been certain death to looking forward to an old age.
The fact is now, you're on these drugs, you will probably live a normal lifespan. So now it's becoming a concern that, you know, maybe you're heading into cardiovascular territory. So the cigarettes are going to have to be looked at eventually. Cut them down to just a few occasions. Okay, and I noticed the last doctor you saw, Dr. Alex, also brought up the cigarettes. Oh, it's going to be a constant nag.
All that proves, as far as I'm concerned, is that basically I'm healthy and you're looking for something that's wrong with me. You know.
Tristan's outcome is extraordinary. From the dark days of losing his partner, he's now really in pretty damn good shape, isn't he?
Yeah, it is extraordinary that, because I remember in 95 when I diagnosed him HIV positive. I mean, his immune system was already disintegrating. We don't know how long he'd been positive, and he was probably just looking at a few years. He would have died.
Are we getting almost close to the time when we can close the book on HIV and say it's no more than asthma or diabetes, it's a chronic condition and it must be taken seriously, but it's easy to deal with?
No, that's the kind of attitude that brings complacency, and us in the business are really terrified about that. I would say to somebody, you just come in and sit in on one of our clinics and just be there when we're telling some young man that he's HIV positive. And, you know, young man I told last week, absolutely devastated, trembling with fear and agitation, absolutely feels his life is terrified, ruined, destroyed. I mean, it is still a devastating disease to acquire, and every case is a tragedy. They all cost the NHS about $500,000 as well in a lifetime. I mean, we're still looking at massive personal tragedy, a lot of expense, and a life that's changed beyond belief.
Colm believes living with HIV is an enormous struggle. Drugs have transformed the lives of his patients, but they have a definite downside. Kate McLean was born positive in Scotland in 1985. At the time, scientists put the name HIV to the virus she inherited from her mother. Kate was adopted at 2 by parents who were told not to expect a long life with her.
Went to see a public health doctor. I think that's what his role was. And he sat us down and said, you know, of course that this child is very unlikely to reach school age.
Wow.
The doctor's forecast was bleak because Kate was born when there was no medication. The concern is reflected in this film of Kate, aged 6.
And I've got a bug inside me. It's mostly about when you get cut or something. Like the other day, I was picking bamboos and I scratched my face. A friend of mine was about to go and touch it, and I said, "Don't do it. It gives germs." And it does. So don't touch other people's bloods.
Kate was fortunate to find a consultant who was prepared to experiment with blood transfusions. The transfusions kept her alive until the drug trial started when she was 6.
Sometimes it was sore.
But with the drugs came the side effects.
I got sickness, I got diarrhoea from the start. I'm on tablets now, and I still get sickness, I still get diarrhoea. I've had rashes in the past from tablets. I'm lucky, I take 9 tablets a day. I mean, I'm to take my tablets every 12 hours. It's meant to be bang on every 12 hours. And if you have a life and you're a young person, every 12 hours isn't that easy. There's days where if I want to go into town, I can't go into town because I've taken my tablets and I'm thrown up. Or I've taken my tablets and I can't get off the toilet for more than 2 minutes.
Despite all that, Kate knows that most people just think she's lucky to have the pills.
I just resent the fact that people say there's tablets. It's okay, you know, where it's not that easy. There's some horrendous
Plus,
effects.
there are still HIV-related things that get through.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm constantly in pain with like joints, which is HIV-related, chest infections, stomach problems as well. I've been into hospital, you know, year after year with sore stomach, and them putting the camera down the throat and saying that it's just red and line and thin.
But then something happened that would seem like a miracle for a girl expected not to live to see school.
Oh, thank you.
Kate gave birth to a daughter, Iona.
Iona was never planned for a start. Right. She was an accident. For me to know that I had HIV and still to go ahead, it's very, is it right, is it wrong? It's been hell at times. Knowing what I've been through and knowing how I felt at times and how desperately low and, you know, I felt, I don't know if I could have done that to my daughter.
I can't wait to plug it in. Doesn't see it properly.
But advances in medicine have made it now almost 100% safe for positive mums not to pass the virus to their babies. Taking HIV drugs, having a caesarean birth and not breastfeeding meant that after 3 months of tests, Kate knew Iona was safe. So the girl born positive was able to give birth to a daughter born negative.
It's always a joy. Do you remember that man that said to me that I shouldn't be taking Iona into the ward?
Yes.
No wonder the advances in HIV treatment are thought to be the single greatest success story in the medical world in recent times. But despite that, Kate knows she is rare. Almost all of the children in Scotland born at the same time as her with HIV are now dead.
I remember finding out that actually I was the only one left, you know, out of a group of people, which in a way I think terrifying. I'm a very lucky person as well, you know, but it's also very scary. How long can you be the last person?
Seeing Kate makes me realise both how far we've come in treating HIV and why it's so important that better drugs with less toxic side effects keep being developed. Just about everyone I've met with HIV has experienced similar reactions to Kate's. And there's another emerging problem that's increasingly worrying scientists and doctors. Medical science now recognises how clever and resilient HIV is. It keeps changing and finding ways to counter the drugs, so the infection keeps growing and patients find the drugs stop working for them. In the most extreme circumstances are what's called salvage patients. For them, none of the drugs works, and they're back in the position they were before drugs were discovered. Michael Gottlieb is a doctor trying to find new drugs for salvage patients, which is rather ironic as he was one of the doctors who originally discovered AIDS in his patients in Los Angeles in the early 80s. Rock Hudson was his patient, but Michael couldn't help him because there were no drugs. Now there are, but he's in much the same position with another patient with AIDS.
Okay, I just want to check a couple things today on your exam, is that all right?
Chuck Chavez is a salvage patient. His body is resistant to all available drugs.
Did you notice any thrush?
I'm going to look now because I didn't have a good light. All right. Okay, open wide. Say ah. No, don't see any.
Good.
Chuck is someone who's had HIV probably for 20 years and who was treated early once medicines became available in the late 80s. And he has been able to hang in there all these years, kind of jumping from one leaky lifeboat to the next. But he has, unfortunately, exhausted all of the medications that are approved for sale. Well, on the bottom here, the black lines indicate all the drugs that he's resistant to.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9.
The result is that Chuck's immune system is almost gone.
Well, he's currently got about 13 CD4 cells per cubic millimeter of blood.
Wow, a count of 13 is about as low as it gets.
People have died of AIDS at 500, and he's got 13.
So it is pretty much the last chance saloon for him. He could die, is what you're saying, really.
He could die. It's a race against time. It's a race against the virus.
Chuck fears he won't win this race. He knows his partner Jerry, diagnosed at the same time 15 years ago, didn't. Without drugs to help him, Jerry's immune system collapsed quickly. Chuck watched him die.
He finally succumbed to full-blown AIDS, where he couldn't even get out of bed. Honestly, he smiled and shut his eyes, and that was it. He was gone.
Chuck now knows he's resistant to all 24 of the current regime of drugs. His only hope is a new kind of pill. It's not tested or licensed, but Chuck has no alternative but to be a guinea pig.
Do you look at this one here and think, this is it? This is these little white ones. This is the last chance saloon. You know, if you develop a resistance to these, is there anything left? Does it scare you?
Jerry was always one step behind a new drug coming out.
And you were always one ahead.
And I'm always one ahead. So if I never win the lottery, I think I've won the lottery as far as the new drugs coming out.
How you started.
Chuck is lucky. He's one of only 3 patients chosen by Dr. Gottlieb to trial the new drug. Currently, there are 40,000 salvage patients in America. This new drug will fit alongside Chuck's current regime. He perseveres with an amazing total of 36 pills each day. Many are taken to try to control the side effects of the HIV drugs.
So what's that one?
This one is for dizziness.
So are some of these actually addressing side effects of the antiretroviral medication?
Right.
Because they can cause nausea, can't they?
You just have dry heaves and you just feel like, you know, your stomach just constantly hurts. And one of the biggest parts of it is taking care of your liver. And I have that monitored all the time because these pills are horrific on your liver. The problem we have now is that younger kids are thinking, I can take a pill and I can manage this disease. And I just shake my head like, if you only knew what someone like me had to live through and go through. I don't know how many times I've heard, I can take a pill.
Yeah.
I can take a pill.
The message is clear. A life on HIV drugs is a difficult one. But there's no doubt medication has been the big breakthrough in the story of AIDS. Without drugs, HIV remains a death sentence. That's what so terrifies people who live in the many parts of the world, especially Africa, where there's no real access to the drugs available in the developed world. That's why people with HIV want to come to Britain for treatment when the drugs aren't available in their own country. They come to save their lives. It's as simple as that.
But do you find most people here friendly?
Yeah, people are friendly.
Mary Kawamera was in Britain visiting relatives when she fell sick. Her relatives encouraged her to be tested while she was here because they knew Mary had already lost her father, brother, and 2 sisters to AIDS in Uganda. Mary was diagnosed positive and a short while later put on drug treatment.
I responded. Within 3 months, when I started really concentrating on the medicine.
It's manageable.
Yeah, it's manageable.
For the past 5 years, Mary's drug treatment has held her HIV at bay. But at the same time, she's been fighting to remain in Britain to allow her to keep taking the drugs. 3 years ago, Mary's final appeal was turned down. She knows it's only a matter of time before she has to return to Uganda. And bluntly, she's afraid of a life without the drugs that keep her well in Britain.
If I'm in Africa, chances of my life are going to be cut short.
And you think you will suffer if you go back to Uganda?
Yeah, it's really scaring and worrying because I can't afford even the medicine. I don't know whether my drug will be there. So I'm a bit worried that maybe if I don't get the right drug for me, things will worsen. What I learn or hear from others is like this medicine here is it's the best quality medicine. Pretty dogs, what are the names?
What makes the situation more difficult for Mary is that her 7-year-old son Walter has been with her in Britain since he was 3. He is not positive. When she's sent back, Mary feels sure she will become ill, perhaps die. She will not be able to look after Walter. She fears he'll become just another African orphan. So she has taken the painful decision to leave him here with foster parents.
That's why I'm like, I should leave my son and face the death panel alone. It upsets, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Wow.
It's a tragic situation. There's no doubt that Mary genuinely thinks she will not receive the treatment she requires in Uganda. I was in Uganda 9 years ago for comic relief, and I knew then its reputation was a shining example in Africa of a country making real progress in dealing with the epidemic. So I want to find out if things have changed. I want to start with a family I met last time, deep in the Ugandan countryside. They had been ravaged by AIDS. The children were orphans.
Granny, isn't it?
Head of the struggling family was a 12-year-old, Vincent.
No, I don't believe it. How are you, my friend? Oh, it's good to see you. How are you?
I was pleased to find out that he was still negative, as was his younger sister, but another sister had died.
There are, in this district of Uganda alone, they say there are 49,000
orphans, children.
Yeah, children. Is she optimistic about Uganda? Does she think things will be better for the next generation?
Because they have been telling them that drugs was found, but all the same people keep on dying.
I asked Vincent if the problem was a lack of access to drugs.
Yeah. And do you know people who are on the new pills, the new medication?
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
It's worrying if drugs don't reach here because over 85% of Ugandans live, like Vincent and his family, in rural areas. Even the nearest hospital is 3 hours away by car, but its size is a sign of the government's emphasis on trying to improve HIV treatment. 6 years ago, I was told the AIDS department was this lorry container.
These are the ARVs.
The antiretrovirals. These are the famous pills that everybody campaigned to try and have a cheaper and at generic quality.
And we're really grateful because initially when the clinic had just begun, patients were buying, and we therefore had very few patients on the ARVs.
Winnie told me patients originally couldn't afford to buy because a month's supply of HIV drugs would cost half a year's annual income. But now Britain and countries like America and Germany have donated free drugs.
And how soon after taking the drugs does your count go up and you start to feel better? Is it quick?
Yeah, it takes like 4 months to feel better.
So it's probable that you would, if you had not had this, you may well be dead.
Yeah.
They saved your life.
Yeah, I appreciate.
Yeah. What would you say is the main problem now facing Uganda?
Supply of drugs, so that we have a constant supply.
So it's still a problem them getting through, is it?
Yeah, getting constant supply of drugs. And then the other one would be, okay, most patients come from very far to come here, get the drugs. So if we can get more centers to distribute the drugs far in the villages, that would help a lot.
For the HIV drugs to be effective, patients have to adhere 100% to the daily doses. So an interruption in supply means people become even sicker and end up overwhelming the hospital.
Is your ward always full?
Yes, always full.
Always full. So,
in fact, you're seeing it very unfull because normally we have 75 patients and about 50 beds, and usually there are a line of people up the middle. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, when the beds get full, often very sick people are on the floor because they're the last people to arrive.
You've discovered that you are HIV positive?
mama wangu olina obwire bwasirimu nkaba kugambira ng'obwine. Yeah, she knows she's HIV positive. Keep her here until when she gets slightly better. No,
she starts to put on a bit of weight.
Not actually. If the diarrhea stops and she doesn't vomit any longer and she's able to drink and maybe sit, probably we would discharge her to go.
And then she just goes back out into the world.
As you probably see, we get high admission rates, so we don't necessarily keep patients for longer.
What would you say were the major problems facing this sector, the HIV/AIDS sector in Uganda? What is it that you most need?
Of course, even when we have antiretroviral drugs, they are not necessarily enough for the many more patients who still need the drugs.
Compared to my last visit, there are free drugs in Uganda, but the question is for how many of those that need them? I decide to go to Kampala, the capital, and meet a woman who is an outspoken critic of the government and who is herself positive.
We are finding people going without treatment, missing their treatment for some months because they will go to the ARV center where they should get the treatment and it hasn't come because it's all stuck in the national medical stores.
And that's very dangerous.
So why are the drugs not getting through?
I think the biggest challenge is for most of Uganda today is really corruption and lack of accountability.
Yes, I've heard corruption called a kind of social AIDS, as it were.
If you track the monies that have been coming in since 1998, it's been more volumes of money.
Yeah.
But why are we stagnating there? Because there's corruption.
But the point is the infection rate has not gone down.
No, it has stagnated.
Beatrice tells me that because of the corruption, Western countries have held money back.
There's still that we haven't cleaned our house very well. Donors are questioning our competence and the fact that we have not brought the culprits to justice.
Major Ruranga. Hello. How do you do? I'm Stephen Fry.
Beatrice said I should meet Major Ruranga, who at one time was very close to the president, Mr. Museveni, until, that is, the Major came out about being HIV positive. Since then, he's devoted his life to reducing the harm HIV is doing to Uganda. He agrees with Beatrice that HIV aid money is not reaching those I now know desperately need drugs.
The money which they collected did not actually go to those, who needed it. The richest people, or the people who may have a lot of, financial clout in this country, those big people who went into HIV/AIDS, and they're the ones who have built very huge mansions and all that kind of thing as a result of HIV and AIDS.
It worries me to send a message, don't give your money to Uganda because it's going to go to the wrong place. On the other hand, it also worries me to think that it will go to the wrong place. So what is the solution? Do you want our viewers to stop helping Uganda, those who do?
I think anyone who takes an interest in trying to help should try and do a needs assessment. Try to find out if this money goes into this place.
But how do you... I don't know how I would...
I certainly know it is very, very hard.
There is no easy answer, but the need for aid is so clear. World health statistics say that only 1 in 6 Ugandans have access to HIV drugs. The Major is far more pessimistic.
If you should ask me what percent is getting the medicine, and I would tell you, if anything, it might be not more than 0.5%, if at all. Really? Oh, yes.
The Major then invited me to see what he's doing to help. He's a one-man mobile condom dispenser.
What's in here?
Condoms, of course. This is our storage.
Now, although Uganda is a Catholic country, the government in the 1990s really pushed condoms and held the rise in HIV infection rates. But in the last few years, the government's attitude has changed, prompted by restrictions on American aid money. Right-wing evangelical Christians in the US favor abstinence and faithfulness, and as a result, the number of condoms in Uganda is only a fraction of what was available 5 years ago.
So now to think that HIV would now make people abstain and be faithful is really naive. And I think that's the message that the faith-based organizations have sent, which is not very good.
So, Shall I take one? Thank
Okay,
you.
sure.
Surprisingly
It's
heavy.
not very heavy.
Yeah. That's 3,000 condoms.
When I carry condoms, no matter how much I carry, I get a problem. You know, people are fighting for condoms.
Oh, see, they're just so desperate to have
them. Grabbing, and they say, this one is taking too much. You know, there's so much of a fight. Now, how do we protect ourselves from HIV? Yes.
Abstinence.
Abstinence, good. Yes.
Use of condoms.
Use of condom.
How many of you have had sex without a condom?
Hey, you know.
The Major carries his safe sex message all over Uganda, but he knows the odds he's up against. At the latest World AIDS Conference, the epidemic in Africa was described as uncontrolled. For every one person being treated, 6 more are newly infected, and a truly terrifying 25 million now live with HIV.
There you go. Is that Manchester United there? I'm going to take those back.
The Major has enormous energy and intends to keep persuading Ugandan men to wear condoms. But the outlook is grim, and I can't help feeling HIV-positive women in Uganda will have to continue to create what they call their memory books, family stories collected for the children they will not see growing up.
She was tested and she was free.
And you do know that you were right, which is a very, very nice thing to do.
Yeah, I wrote a few things because
Oh,
that's what I had.
yes. And she loves to see that.
Yeah. Here I wrote that I remember the time when you laughed. Because as a baby, the
We
time,
always remember the first laugh, the first smile.
the first smile.
These are very beautiful photographs. Malengo of Polemba, also in Bundibugyo. Oh, that's a tiny picture. That's so sweet. And keep this memory book, because not all parents are able to make such a book for their children. From your mum. It's very lovely. Your future will be bright. You're the one who's responsible for you and your brother. I wish you a better future in your life. Oh, it's very touching.
There's absolutely no question that people in Africa can only dream about the range of drugs readily available in Britain. In Africa, they're limited to 3 or 4 medications, the original and more toxic ones. By contrast, in Britain, patients choose from 24 drugs that are always being improved. When I was in Africa, I also discovered that 90% of those with HIV didn't know they have it. Understandable, perhaps, when for most, there are no drugs. But to my surprise, I found out that in Britain, where there's treatment available for all, between 1/3 and 1/2 of those with HIV don't know they have it. That could be 30 to 40,000 people who stay undiagnosed until they get so ill they have to go to hospital and are then tested. I went to the Royal Free Hospital in North London, famous for its treatment of HIV patients, to talk to a professor there who is really concerned about the consequences of late diagnosis.
In my role as chair of the audit committee of the British HIV Association, we've done a series of audits, and the results come out unfortunately every time with the same conclusions. If we look at our mortality audit, what we find is that 1/4 of people dying from HIV in the UK die during that first presentation due to late diagnosis. And, I would still say to you, that's a vast underestimate. I have a young girl on the ward at the moment, she's 30, she's got a young child. I mean, she, has presented, late. She's gone on to have a fungal infection in her lung. That lung isn't working. She's got fungus in her brain. She's going to end up having to have a pneumonectomy. And, it just is tragedy to see, someone who, if only, had been on antiretrovirals a year ago.
Why are there so many late presenters? Because what really is the crisis in HIV is that people, for some reason, not coming forward for testing.
We need to offer HIV testing in a whole set of, different settings, and I think that was the problem. I think that, we did propagate the view that HIV testing should be, you know, offered in an HIV clinic like this.
And that's what's brought me to Middlesbrough, to see a way of testing that doesn't require you to go to a hospital or a sexual disease clinic. It's in the centre of the town, but can be approached, shall we say, discreetly, and is run out of a drop-in centre for positive people. 25 years ago, it took 3 weeks to get my test result, and it's very different now.
How much blood do you need?
It's just a few drops to get to that black line there. Hardly any. So just going to make a very, very small jab.
Oh.
Like the first one away there.
It's amazing. You can do this test in 50 minutes. You'll be able to tell me whether I'm HIV positive or not.
Yeah,
that is extraordinary. Well, let's let it boil, shall we? And whoa.
It may now only be a 15-minute wait, but taking an HIV test remains one of those moments when you feel that your life might change forever. Out back, I found 2 others who'd been tested just before me.
10 minutes.
10 minutes and counting, yeah.
Nervous?
Yeah, slightly, but I'm quite kind of confident I'll be okay.
Yeah, and you?
Yeah. I'm all right, yeah. Confident.
Yeah. The fact is, you've come, without me getting too personal, that means that you have full, active sex lives.
Yeah. I came out of a long-term relationship. Unfortunately, my partner died, so it wasn't something that, you know, it was a big shock. But I suppose because I'm 40, like 41 now, so you get to that age and, yeah, you kind of, you know, you've gone through being in this long-term relationship and then you've got to start again kind of thing, you know, and it is a worry, you know.
Well, it's actually, the test is rather like sex itself, isn't it? It's slightly unpleasant and lasts about a minute, so it's ideal. It's a reflection of the act that may have brought you here in the first place.
One of the reasons why I came here was because I was with a girl who, what I didn't know at the time, was a bit promiscuous. And when I found that out, it was a bit dodgy to continue doing what I was doing if she was doing what she was doing when she was with me.
Well, I think that's one of the problems.
They didn't have this, I guess, kind of drop-in centre, a kind of localised way of getting an incredibly quick and easy
It does make a difference.
Discreet.
Yeah.
Would you have done the same? Would you have gone to a GU clinic, a sexual health clinic in a hospital?
No.
Neither of you would?
No, it's quick. It doesn't give you time to actually think, change your mind, because some people do change their mind.
Well, I think it must be time.
Yes,
Kathy
indeed.
first.
Yes.
Very best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Thoughts are with her, aren't they?
Yeah. Just take a seat there. Right, the test result has come through negative.
Ah, thank you.
Right, the result of the test has come back negative.
Right.
Right, the result for your test has come back and the result is negative.
Whoa. It's weird, but I've been weirdly nervous for the last 15 minutes while chatting outside. Is that common even?
Yeah, I mean 15 minutes is a long 15 minutes for people to wait.
So what sort of age range of people have you had coming in here?
We've had everything from about, I think, 17 right the way through to 60 in the test, so it's quite a mix, and I think for us it was quite an important thing to get quite a lot of heterosexual men in probably the late 30s into the 50s, because they're a group that by rights would never access hospital-based clinics.
And I can imagine you would get lots of people testing, and then probably even people watching this who didn't even know that this was possible. People think, oh, where's the nearest one? I just pop in like that. It's not a hospital. People won't see me, you know, walking up the steps of the sexual health clinic. You know, it seems to me a very good way forward.
In 6 months, Michael has tested over 80 people from the Middlesbrough area alone. 80 people whom we have to suppose would not otherwise have been tested. 4 of them were positive. 4 people who'd have gone on infecting others and not getting treatment until it was perhaps too late.
Yay!
I'm laughing now, but the waiting was actually nerve-wracking, although I had no reason to be concerned.
Well done you, matey.
With treatment immediately available, it makes sense to know. But as Michael emphasised, it's not just drugs that follow from a positive test. There's shame and stigma too. And that's a feeling I've become more and more aware of while making these programmes. It's been extraordinarily difficult to persuade people with HIV to take part. Those who have are very definitely the exceptions. This reluctance was fully brought home to me when I visited the HIV ward in this London hospital to talk to patients about filming them. Now, the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital is the largest HIV hospital in Europe. It has 4,500 HIV-positive patients, and the wards here are now very different from the conveyor belts of death consultant Mark Nelson told me they used to be. They really reflect the success of medication for HIV. It's a good news story that I wanted to show, but all I got to do was wait. And wait. Eventually, Mark Nelson told me the problem.
The thing about HIV is that people are frightened of divulging their status. I'll give you an example. We'd hoped that we were going to have one of the patients said, yeah, he was more than happy to do the film. And then this morning he said, I'm not doing that, I can't do it. And I said, why? And it's not that he's worried about divulging his HIV, it's the effect. He said, I live on a really rough estate, you know, I go on television, my life's going to be a misery. So it's about other people. The stigma isn't about... I don't think people with HIV are all that frightened about divulging their status. You know, yeah. What they're frightened of is the response of others.
Not one single person in the ward would consent to be filmed, and they don't want to be seen. They have a feeling that you down there, down the lens, will see their faces, and if you happen to see them in the street the next day, you what, kick at them, spit them? Would you? I don't believe the British public would. I feel that the fear of stigma is probably greater than the stigma that is out there, but it operates as the same thing. That, to me, is really the horrifying story behind HIV in the United Kingdom today, is no longer a medical crisis, it's a kind of social crisis.
I was particularly struck by the strength of this feeling when I came to Manchester to talk to a group of men who attend Body Positive, a support group for those with HIV in the northwest of England. Apart from one young man, they simply wouldn't agree to be seen. They said they'd suffer if their faces were visible. When I heard the reason a grandfather in his 70s gave, I realised the pressure an HIV person can be under.
I've got 4 daughters and a son.
Right, and they would prefer you not to speak?
Oh, yeah, one of my daughters, when she knew this was going on, she said, well, if you go on camera, forget it, I'm off.
Really? She'd disown you?
Oh, yeah, she was really, really against it. But I think it's what other people, you know, the kids going to school and your granddad's HIV, you know, that's the sort of thing that goes on, isn't it? Unfortunately, it's because it's related to sex, there's no question about that, because, as I say, if I was to tell somebody I'd got diabetes, they wouldn't bother Apeth, would they, really?
No, no.
The stigma is there, there's no question about that. You can be talking in a group, having a drink, you know, and someone mentions HIV, and you can tell that the stigma is there. I'd love the day to come when everybody accepted it, but I can't see that happening.
There's absolutely no question about the fear people with HIV have about others knowing about their condition. Laura Towell was infected by her partner over 10 years ago. He died, and she came to live in Brighton, a place, because of its gay connections, I would have thought would have been a relaxed place to live with HIV. She was certainly prepared to be seen and talk to me, but I wondered if she's experienced reactions that hurt her.
Every time I do have to tell somebody, it's really traumatic and really quite distressing. I had sort of one incident with somebody who I disclosed my status to, and they asked me to leave. And
what, were you in the house? Or?
Yeah, so I was in the house and they asked me to leave. And I just remember sort of being in the streets of Brighton somewhere, and it was quite late at night, sort of on my own, or having been asked to leave.
Simply because you were HIV positive?
Yes.
Did they give a reason?
I didn't wait for a reason, I just left.
But how hurtful.
Yes. I think I reeled from that for weeks afterwards, actually. On several occasions I've been made to feel as though I'm contaminated. You know, when I've sort of had to deal with dentists, let them know that I have HIV. And I did do it with one particular dentist in Brighton, and he then said that I had to have the last appointment of the day. And I asked him why that was, and he said that it was to protect his other patients. I felt very angry about it. Those little insidious low-level discrimination it sort of eats away at my confidence and my self-esteem.
Laura took me to meet a friend who's helped her through some of her more difficult moments.
I remember a time when you came round, when you started seeing somebody and you disclosed your status, and it was a big deal for him, and he had to go and try and work out what he could do, and you were left
just hanging,
just waiting.
Did he come back?
He came back very, very drunk. I found him on my doorstep.
Sort of rang the doorbell. Oh, really? Yeah.
I found him on my doorstep, hardly able to stand, saying that he had gone away and he'd spoken to a friend of his and said that he'd met me and that I had HIV, and this friend had said, well, just don't have anything to do with her, you know.
Makes her sound like a monster.
Well, yeah.
I think for me it's kind of, I think I just go into, you know, I'm not a good person, and that...
Yes, exactly. Do you think maybe you're not going to be able to have a big, proper relationship?
Yes, I do, and it makes me really sad to think that I might have to spend the rest of my life alone.
Medically, Laura can cope with HIV. Socially, it's a killer. And the stigma isn't imagined, it's clearly there in the comments and behaviour of others. In making this programme, I've often heard doctors say we need another campaign to warn people about the dangers of HIV, like that one 20 years ago. The rise in HIV statistics is the reason they give. But for me, the big surprise has been discovering the ferocious stigma that surrounds HIV. Medically, everything in Britain has moved on. Psychologically, it seems to have got worse. And many of those I've spoken to with HIV point to the fear and horror that original campaign promoted. They say today's stigma directly relates to that, so I'd love these programmes, in their own way, to help move everything on, because there is so much that's got better and more hopeful about HIV. To help me reinforce that, I want to include Heather and Perry Evans. What's happened to them reflects the progress that's been made treating HIV. But they agreed to take part because they are aware that HIV is as much a social problem as a medical one. Perry has haemophilia and contracted HIV in the early 1980s from a transfusion with contaminated blood. He was told he had between 2 and 5 years to live. But Perry kept working, got a girlfriend, got married. He volunteered for drug trials.
And so then when we hit our 5-year wedding anniversary, it was like, ooh. And so then we hit our 10th wedding anniversary.
We thought, wow, this is amazing, and, well, let's see how longer we can keep on going, or how longer I can keep on going.
Heather and Perry were able to take advantage of another medical breakthrough here at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London. It involved a new technique called sperm washing that removes the virus from a man's semen, making it safe before insemination.
I thought it was amazing. I mean, given the fact that you're told you're going to die and you'll never have kids, when Isaac was born, I was just like beside myself with joy and emotion.
What I'm about to say may be surprising to some, shocking to others, but to all of you we pray you hear a story of God's love and grace in our lives.
Perry then chose Isaac's christening to tell their friends, who mostly didn't know, that he had HIV.
I was born with a hereditary blood disorder called haemophilia in 1983. I had an accident that meant I needed a blood transfusion. Unfortunately, it contained some contaminated blood, and in 1985, I tested positive for HIV.
I mean, that's 6 years ago now. There was still a stigma associated with HIV and AIDS. I was actually toying with the idea of not actually explaining how I'd actually got it, because it is actually not important. No one deserves the virus. No one deserves to die from AIDS. And although, yes, I've received it through contaminated blood, that doesn't make me any different from any other human being in terms of the suffering and, the pain and all of that goes with it. I toyed with the idea of explaining.
And if anyone did show that attitude, you'd challenge it straight away.
Yeah.
My doctors at the Royal Free advised me that I could have anything from 5 to 7 years to live. I was advised not to have children, This was a bit of a shock, but I didn't feel angry, and I trusted God with my life. So into the future, we go not knowing what awaits us, other than God will be by our side, seeing us through. Amen.
But shortly after Isaac was born, Perry received another blow. He was diagnosed with an AIDS-defining illness, a cancer called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Within 8 months, I've been given another death sentence, for want of a better expression. That was more gutting and more emotionally destroying, because now I had a child and I felt, you know, hopeless, helpless.
Perry was given chemotherapy and spent 6 months in hospital. His lung was damaged, but this was the moment he and Heather decided to try for another child.
While he was on the treatment, he kept saying, shall we try for another?
You
Shall we
raided
try
the
for
fridge.
another?
That worked out perfectly. You've got a gorgeous little girl.
I know, and a girl. It just felt like a miracle to have a child and a miracle to have a girl.
It is hard sometimes, but equally the rewards are, you can't measure the rewards.
Yeah.
You know, a cuddle, a smile.
Of those who, like Perry, contracted HIV from blood transfusions, 2/3 have now died. Perry also contracted hepatitis C from the same blood. He survived the cancer, but now, because of the hepatitis C, has cirrhosis of the liver. Once again, doctors have told Perry that his future is bleak.
When I was told about the lymphoma, that actually this is probably what was going to take me in terms of death. And I wrote down all of the things that I would want to do with him, like, you know, teach him how to ride a bike, teach him how to, you know, score a goal and all of those things. I also bought lots of birthday cards for different years. I wrote them out, which they're upstairs. So I haven't had to use any of those yet. And maybe I never will.
I've not heard from either of you a hint of self-pity.
Perry, he hates it.
When you come to the park and you see your children swinging around, is part of it always coloured by this sense that maybe you're not going to be there next year?
It saddens me to think that maybe, you know, one day soon I might not be around to be there for them.
Yeah.
But equally, it's like seize the moment and enjoy the moments.
Because I really admire this, the candour with which you and Perry have spoken to me, because it's very rare.
I didn't want to do it. Perry wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it.
Really?
That was my first instinct. And Perry was very much, it's just life, just say it like it is, like cancer was in the 1950s. And what switched in my mind was thinking, actually, if this programme can help get rid of the stigma so that children experience a better memory of their dad, that would be a good thing.
So right. Throughout the making of this programme, I've been staggered by the lack of awareness and understanding of HIV. Young people in particular, I feel, are at risk and need protection. We're launching GI Johnny online at bbc.co.uk/health, where you can learn the facts and spread the message, and not the virus. So log on to find out more.